Bine v-am regăsit la EuroDicţionar. E o perioadă complicată, sunt vremuri tulburi, întrebări foarte multe, răspunsuri destul de puține, îndoieli suficiente și atunci, din când în când, e bine să încercăm să facem lumină. Oricum, în acest moment, Moldova dorește să se îndrepte în continuare către Uniunea Europeană. Evident că încercăm să facem lumină cu ajutorul celor care reprezintă la cel mai înalt nivel Uniunea Europeană în Republica Moldova. Vă este deja cunoscut, desigur, numele domnului Pirkka Tapiola, care este șeful delegației Uniunii Europene în Republica Moldova. Un domn pe care, într-un fel sau altul, l-am văzut implicat în tot ceea ce se întâmplă în Republica Moldova, doar o implicare de tip european. Adică o implicare în care nu se amestecă, dar participă. Cum poate să fie asta? Vom afla, pentru că domnul Tapiola a acceptat invitația noastră și are destule lucruri să ne spună despre tot ceea ce s-a petrecut, să spunem, în ultimele 45 de zile în Republica Moldova. Motiv pentru care voi continua dialogul cu dânsul în limba engleză. Dumneavoastră veți urmări cu siguranță subtitrările. Mr. Tapiola, thank you very much for accepting this invitation.
My pleasure.
I have somehow defined that we would discuss about the past 45 days in Moldova, including the pre-elections period, the elections period, and the things that are about to come. Would you agree to this?
I certainly agree to that, but we can talk more broadly as well.
Of course. We had elections.
Yes.
We had controversies.
Very true.
We are waiting for results. Let's start with the pre-electoral period and the controversies related to that. And
Sure.
I would ask you, first of all, how did you, as the High Representative of the European Union in Moldova, regard the Patria Party question, problem? Was that all right? Was that by the law? Was that correct to exclude them before the elections?
Let's put it this way. I'm not going to go into the merits of the case, because here I'm not an investigator, I am not a judge, nor a policeman, or a prosecutor. However, in an electoral period, if you exclude a political contestant, which according to the opinion polls is doing well 3-4 days before the election, well, that does raise questions. And that was said also by the International Electoral Observation Mission.
And questions that have already got their answers, or there are still suspicions above the problem?
Well, I don't know if we can really get answers to those questions. As said, it was 3-4 days. It changed the sort of choice of candidates for the electorate in a quite dramatic manner, and that as such raises questions. I think I'm using rather the word questions to avoid using the word concern, because maybe that would be too strong. But it is not something which would normally happen in a traditional democratic process.
Let's say that investigations are still underway. Probably we will get some official answers from those institutions that are really habilitated to find the problems and give the answers. But on the other hand, were the results indeed dramatically changed, as long as still the first winner was a left-wing party, and everyone said that actually that party also got the votes of those ones that would have initially voted for Mr. Rosati?
Well, I cannot get into the heads of each and every Moldovan voter who went to the polls, and did I really vote for whom I wanted to vote for? Did I have to go and vote for somebody else for that reason? That, in a way, does not matter. But in a way, if you have a pre-electoral situation and you have electoral contestants, you can't really quite well say that, okay, because an opposition party did well, because another opposition group was taken out, so therefore, what's the problem? I'm looking at it more in a systemic manner, in a manner of integrity of institutions, of procedures, of conduct of elections. The European Union has said in many places in the world that what is important is to play by the rules, not with the rules.
We have already a result which has been accepted by the laws of the Republic of Moldova, accepted by the European Union, accepted by the Russian Federation, and overall accepted by everyone.
That is correct.
So that makes it correct. We can say that the elections in Moldova were correct. Above any legal suspicions, but still waiting for some answers?
I would say that the EU's position has always been very clearly in support of the findings of the International Electoral Observation Mission headed by the OSCE, and that's what they were at this moment. Nobody has doubted the electoral result as such. I think there are questions around the elections, and it is not really that important whether those questions are in my mind or whether those, but what is really important is how those questions are dealt with in society, and then how the recommendations of the International Electoral Observation Mission will be then taken on board in preparation for future processes.
Right. Now we have another dilemma. Everyone is looking at the negotiations between the parties, that negotiations that are ongoing. One of the participants would rather claim that they are not transparent. You yourself have been invited to be a part of the negotiations to give more transparency and probably more balance in the negotiations. You have declined this invitation. Still, what is your point of view about this whole process? Should it be more transparent? Should it be with an external or a third, if I may say so, party involved in it?
I think that one of the tests of maturity of democracy is the capability of political leaders to find solutions in negotiations among themselves. And I think I would be doing a disservice if I would start characterizing the process. It is true that we hear very, very little about it in the public eye, but Moldova is a sovereign, independent country, and from that viewpoint, it is important that that the coalition negotiations go forward. They go forward among those parties who have a majority. What we have said from the European Union viewpoint, while, yes, indeed, I noted that it would be a bit strange to have a resident ambassador present in coalition talks, what we have said is that we're interested in a few things as a result of them, and so charting the way to the next 4-year period, to the next mandate, to the work of the government. There are 3 points we have underlined, and I was in Brussels recently. We had a meeting among all 28 EU member states. We discussed these points, and the conclusions we came to were indeed threefold. First, we have an association agreement in place. I think all of us realize that this agreement is a framework for reforms. And the agreement will not, as such, just by existing, be able to deliver. So it is very important that work on reforms is stepped up, that we see more active steps, that we see them in ensuring the independence of the judiciary. One of the problems where I think you also see a lot of popular disillusionment, step up the fight against corruption, work on reforms in general, looking at the financial sector, because I'm aware that there is a large discussion going on in the country on the lack of transparency in the financial sector, and 2 banks have already been taken over to state management. I think here one really needs to work very hard and get the necessary clarity. Let me also underline the importance of the reforms. If we, for instance, now opened the EU market, a market of 500 million people, to Moldova, that's all fine. But what you need in order to get incomes up, what you need in order to get more more jobs, higher salaries, more predictability, are investors. Foreign, European, even Russian, others, it doesn't matter. You need investors, locals. But what investors will first and foremost look at, do I have a recourse to justice? Do I have to fight with corruption? If these 2 basic conditions are not met, it's very unlikely that they will come. So this is one cluster. The second cluster is, and you talked about the elections. I don't think it's that important to note which party came out first, which parties got a mathematical majority, or so on and so forth. What is important to look at, what does the society look like? And what worries me, and I think worries each and every EU member state a little bit, is that your society comes out of this as relatively polarized. And we need a policy to reach out in a broad manner, work with all segments of society in order to take down this polarization, to build more consensus in society, to build resilience in society. And I think that that's the second cluster. And the third one is one of my pet subjects always. Moldova's contribution to European security and development will be her ability to reach out also across the across the Dnistr River to Moldovans in Transnistria, to residents, economic agents and others in Transnistria. Both sides have big responsibilities here. And we really would like to see that we get back to a dialogue, the 5+2 process, returning back on track so that we can continue working towards a sustainable settlement to the Transnistrian conflict, respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of Moldova with a special status for the Transnistrian region.
Now, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you to somehow develop these final two clusters you've been talking about. Yes, it is obvious that the Moldovan society is still very polarized, and it's also obvious the fact that the winning party, we may still call it so, the Socialist Party, is a declared enemy of the European way of the Republic of Moldova, so you cannot consider him a partner in a constructive dialogue for the development of the Moldovan society under these circumstances in which Moldova would still like to go towards Europe. Yeah. But on the other hand, there is the Communist Party, which is more moderate, which has shown several times the fact that it would agree to the association agreement with some comments upon some points. And there is an ongoing discussion by the time we record this program, what to do with the communists. Take them on board in a coalition, have a constructive opposition, try to have a dialogue with them upon specific topics, projects, or simply leave them away in the opposition. And some would speculate, comment upon the fact that this would be the main problem in the negotiations for the leading coalition. Which is your point of view on that? What to do with the communists?
I don't think I really have the right to have a point of view. I'm an ambassador accredited to the Republic of Moldova, which is a sovereign country. Now, however, I did mention the question of inclusiveness. That's, of course, first and foremost on the policy level. As regards the Communist Party, I do remember when I started working with the Republic of Moldova nearly a decade ago, and Moldova's European course was officially announced. Mr. Voronin was president in those days, the country was governed by the Communist Party, and we started developing our relations. Let me just put it this way, that there is an urgent need to look at reaching out, building bridges, and not polarizing society for one or other geopolitical choice. First of all, the EU is not really a geopolitical choice. The EU is a developmental choice. It's a reform-based choice, and that's what it needs to be. I don't personally see that I have enemies in this country. I said already before the elections that the European Union will work with anybody voted in by the electorate. We believe in democracy. For us, this is not sort of empty words. This is what needs to be the case. But, of course, in the context of both building a coalition, and it's not up to me to dictate how this should be done, who should be in, who shouldn't be in. That depends on the parties which were in office or within the coalition until now, and it depends very much on the Communist Party and the Communist Party's own wishes. But I would encourage this kind of a broad policy which reaches out and doesn't build splits. Mm-hmm. Partly, when you talk about the anti-EU feeling, you know that I've been working quite hard in the last year on trying to bring up the EU's visibility, trying to explain what this is and what this is not. And I think it is important to take down this sort of geopolitical choice factor from here. Mm-hmm. People vote in certain ways, usually because they are dissatisfied or because they are disillusioned about something which is very internal. And in a way, if you have something further afield, it's then easy, like the European Union or even the Customs Union, it's easy to use these in an electoral campaign. Now is the time to focus on governing the country, building this consensus. And I think that working for all those forces which are moderate in their views, which are mainstream, which want to work for the best of the country, for consolidating society, consolidating Moldova's statehood, and working towards modernization, reforms, development, and reaching out to all parts of the population. I think it's only logical that they work together.
Would there be any risk in deciding to avoid any contact and discussion with the Communist Party and leave them in a total opposition alongside with the Socialist Party in Moldova?
As I said, it is very important to take down the feeling of polarization in society and work with all parts of one's own society. That's part of political leadership. It's part of taking political responsibility. Let me also underline what I said, that it is important that when we look at the discussions, this is something I sometimes hear, that, okay, from one side we have reforms going forward, from one side we have the need to reach out. These are not alternative directions. They both need to happen. It's important that on both sides work is done with equal zeal.
Now let's go to cluster number 3, as you have
yes.
Named it before, that regarding both banks of the Dniester River.
Yes.
There is a big problem already 20 years more or less of alienation between the two banks. Mm-hmm. There is an almost totally different structure on the eastern bank.
That's correct.
There is almost a completely different state, you would say, if you look into the institutions that have already been built over there. The mentalities, the way of life, everything seems to be quite different. And the dialogue seems to be very difficult. And on the other hand, you have pointed out that Moldova really needs to show how would it contribute to the security of Europe. Mm-hmm. And that frozen conflict over there, it is a security question.
Yes, it is. It's a developmental question as well.
A developmental one?
Yes, as well.
As well. Now, what would be the real chances in somehow trying to change this? Because so far, everything seemed to be totally blocked and almost pointless.
There's nothing pointless in this world, and I think that what is important is not to lose hope, and is sometimes things is to try to work on things, even if they may feel very difficult to achieve. First of all, I don't see there to be an alternative to finding that solution to this. I wouldn't even call it a conflict, because there's a certain normalcy as well in the relationship which we need to take in consideration. You also said alienation. Yes, to a certain extent that's there. From another viewpoint, this level of alienation and the level of difference in mentality and so on may be in fact less than we want to see. People cross the river all the time. I see Transnistrian license plates in Chisinau, a lot of them. I see Moldovan license plates, or on the left bank as well.
But I
If
don't
you
see,
look at trade,
I cannot see Moldavian officials on the other bank. I cannot see Moldavian journalists on the other bank.
and these are kind of issues which need to be focused on, because I think there are a few things, many things which we need to look at. One is, where are the common interests? And if you look at, for instance, trade statistics of both banks, you will it's quite ironic to note that the structure of trade to the European Union elsewhere is about the same. Over half of Transnistria's exports go west. And this is a very, very important thing. If you look at, if you look in many ways at common development interests, if you look at the cost of non-reunification on development terms, it's big for both sides. It's big for both sides. So you need to find ways of looking at those common interests, of reaching out. All the problems which are there will not be solved overnight. That is very clear. But what we would like to see, and what I think is important, that we step up that dialogue, that the political representatives of the two sides, the confidence-building working groups, sectoral working groups, that the regularity of these meetings become much more, the intensity of the regularity goes up in a quite dramatic fashion, and that both sides put on themselves an obligation or a goal to try to find win-win solutions. And that's how common interest gets born. And that is how I think we can try, in a way, also here, as I said about the polarization within Moldovan society as a whole, to take geopolitics slowly out of the question and really equation, and really focus on what affects ordinary people's lives.
Why didn't it work so far, as long as you have yourself pointed out the statistics that would show the real image of the trade, for example? It's obvious, yes. Transnistria also depends on its trade with the West. Why doesn't it work already? What's missing?
I think there are two things. One is trust, and there is a need to build confidence, and that is mutual. There needs to be mutual political will to build that confidence. That, I think, is the first point. Of course, there is also the dilemma that this conflict will need all the participants in the 5+2 to be solved. At the same time, there, I think, is a feeling of, that won't be possible because this and that actor will not allow it, or that will be possible because of one or another thing. Well, I think one just needs to try.
Well, let's be optimistic. Let's consider that at a certain point, everyone would agree, both in Tiraspol and Chișinău, that a kind of reunification somehow should come to life. Would that be possible with the presence of the Russian military over there? And I'm pointing now also to the request recently made by Mrs. Natalia German to the Russian Federation to withdraw its troops from Transnistria. Would that ever happen? And if yes, under what circumstances?
I think it needs to happen sooner or later. It has been said, even by representatives of the Russian Federation, very clearly, that there will be a transformation, or can be a transformation, of the current peacekeeping operation in the context of a settlement. Now, that is all part of the sort of security arrangements and guarantee arrangements which would need to be negotiated in that context of a settlement. But I do understand very clearly that for Chișinău, it is a red line, and I think that for sustainability, in the end, yes, of course, this is any end result needs to lead to full sovereignty. And when you're talking about full sovereignty, you do not have foreign troops on your territory. The special status for Transnistria can be very broad and that needs to be negotiated within the process. But yes, I would imagine that in the context of a settlement, there will be a withdrawal of the peacekeeping operation as well as other military personnel.
You have just said it as very broad special status for Transnistria.
Yes.
What would that be? What would that look like? Something like Ieri Gagauz, something different? Would it really come to life? Because indeed there is a big suspicion on both sides. Some would say you cannot, the Transnistrians are not reliable, they're not trustworthy. If you give them that, it will not be enough. They would request for more and more and more.
Let me put it in this way, that let's again not put stereotypes there, that side is not reliable or the other side is not reliable. We have a 5+2 process, which works on different baskets and which works on different issues, social, economic, others. Then there are the political issues. And it, of course, depends also on the level of confidence and trust when we get to that political basket in it. I will not prejudge in any way, shape or form what that final settlement will look like. It will have to be something which is acceptable to both banks, which provides the viability of Moldova as a state, provides the special status which takes in consideration Transnistria's legitimate interests within that group. I will not even put labels on it, and it needs to be worked sector by sector within the division of competences. That has been the EU's position all along. As you mentioned Gagauzia, I think that here, I'm not going to say that this status would be the same as in Gagauzia or more, or potentially more, but one very important thing where Gagauzia comes into this equation is that we're this year celebrating, and in fact in the past week we've been celebrating 20 years of the Gagauz autonomy law, which was really seen as a fantastic way of solving a conflict. However, we see also that there has been more and more discussion on, is this law being mainstreamed into Moldovan legislation? Can one trust, if you have a special status law, that really is operational? And I think that this is also part of the reaching out policy, and the second cluster I mentioned is that the new parliament, together with the Gagauz People's Assembly, reinvigorate the work of their joint working group, which was established by the last parliament, refrain from making unilateral legislative proposals, and really try to find common ground and agree what's the package, together with the OSCE, help of the OSCE, the Council of Europe, lots of political support from the European Union, to make joint proposals which can then be put through the Parliament and can bring that trust and confidence into the implementation. Now, some may say that these issues are being instrumentalized. Could be, but I would only say that things can be instrumentalized only to the extent that there are vulnerabilities connected to them. And this is also part of the consolidation of Moldovan society.
You are very provocative right now, but unfortunately
I'm not provocative at all. I'm just sticking to European values.
For a journalist like me, we only have 4 minutes left, but still I would ask I would add something more, and I would ask you something. You've said about confidence.
Yes.
And reaching out.
Yes.
I would add something more, courage.
Yes.
Probably Chișinău would need some more courage than Tiraspol would need in this question.
Probably, yes.
As I see it, it would be a courage towards your own people, towards the Russian Federation, and probably towards European Union too, because it's a very difficult bet, probably the most difficult one. Do you think that Moldovan politicians right now could gather the necessary courage for that?
They will certainly have a very strong friend and partner in the European Union to find that courage. because I think that if you look at the enormous amount of work, and I've talked about 3 different clusters, going through those reforms, which are necessitated by the association agreement, but really the association agreement doesn't matter so much here. They are necessitated by consolidating the development path and delivering to the citizens of the Republic of Moldova. That is leadership, that's courage, when you can deliver, when you can break even some vested interests, go against them, in order to bring your country to a growth path, to a path out of the poverty trap. Moldova is still one of the poorest countries in Europe. That can be fixed. When you consolidate your society, and this is also in the regional context, consolidated societies which reach out through minorities, national minority strategies, through building common interest, those are societies which are successful and go forward. I mean, the European Union is after all an example of perhaps the most successful development model in world history, and at the same time has as its goal unity in diversity, because we've taken things which earlier might have been seen as vulnerabilities as our strengths and built on them, and finding that courage to work and really to push with a spirit of generosity to one's own people on both sides of the river for solutions. Yes, that takes courage, but that's what brings success. And that is what leadership is about as well.
Let this be the ending of our show. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Ne oprim aici, să fie acesta finalul. Nu am nimic de adăugat. E doar o chestiune de curaj adevărat. Să sperăm că va exista. Mulțumesc domnului Tapiola pentru prezență, dumneavoastră pentru atenție. Ne vom vedea și peste o săptămână. Până atunci, numai bine.